This is Rational Discourse Weekly, episode 14, filmed on February 4th, 2013. I'm William Garrison.
I'm Phillip Tabb.
And I'm Michael Aune.
This week we talked to Phil a little bit about why we're doing this, if it's good that we're doing this, and, what's the point of everything.
So he's going to play devil's advocate on a lot of these issues, and hopefully we'll get some good banter going for you.
We hope you enjoy.
Thanks.
So this week we have a guest of ours, a friend. This is Phil. He's someone we hang out with relatively regularly, and he didn't mind being on the show this week to kind of bounce some ideas and discussion off of us and
play devil's advocate, since I'm sure everyone is bored of our two faces at this point.
Yep.
So we brought in all of this.
This majestic beard.
It is a pretty majestic beard.
I know.
Yeah, no arguments there.
Yeah.
So what has this beard brought for us?
So the first question I have, I hear you guys talking a lot about atheism and your beliefs. Well, sorry, the truths, as you guys like to say.
lack of belief.
Well, no, not
perceived
necessarily.
truths. We acknowledge that we do not actually have a concrete answer.
I mean, there are so many philosophical questions and conversations that could run out of belief and how that represents truth, but.
Well, that's an epistemological issue, which is a whole different branch of philosophy in its own right.
I guess the
Worth
question
exploring.
that I have, and it's more directed at William, is, you have a strong passion and desire to get further with your atheism.
Yeah.
And the one question I have is, do you see that passion and that strong desire, is it any way similar as the strong desires and passions that religious people have towards their faith?
I think it's almost identical.
Okay.
And what I've talked about it in previous episodes because Penn Jillette is probably one of my favorite atheists. Him and I disagree a lot, like politically, and he's a little bit more conservative about certain topics than I am. But from an atheistic standpoint, he is a huge advocate for proselytizing on both sides. He's more than happy with religious people knocking on doors, giving out Bibles, having the discussion. Because what I've always felt is that the discussion is more important in some ways than just trying to keep your faith, if you're religious, to yourself. And almost because if unchallenged, it's like an assumption that it must be correct. And you're saying my faith cannot be shaken because I won't let it. And there are people that say that even if they do have discussions. I think there are religious people that they get into debates with atheists and they say, regardless of what happens, even if they bring up good points, I'm not going to let that shake my beliefs. And they can do that.
Well, it's the difference between discussion and proselytizing.
Yeah.
Because the idea with the latter is that you have the truth and are trying to bring it to someone else. Discussion, if it's done intellectually honestly, is something where you are willing to concede the point. Otherwise, I mean, you really are just yelling at each other.
Right.
So if you're genuinely committed to the process of saying, let's sit down and let's try and get to the truth of the matter, because if that's really what you're after, and you're coming from two different angles, and there is only one truth, one of you has to be wrong to at least some degree. You have to concede something if you're going to move any closer towards it. So if people are not willing to actually say, I'm going to give anything up, then you're not really having a discussion or a debate. You're just having, back and forth orations at one another.
So to Phil's point, the amount of energy and the amount of passion that is spent on both ends is very similar. The only difference, and this is, again, something I've said on the podcast before going to Penn Jillette, my assertion usually is that atheism doesn't, although most atheists, and myself included because I'm a pretty strong atheist, I claim that the lack of a God is the truth. We, in essence, are almost saying we don't know. But
Well, if you're going to be intellectually honest, you have to say we don't know in the strongest sense.
But the proposition that there is a God isn't something that we can follow through with because there isn't enough evidence for us to say, yes, that's obviously true.
It's not well enough supported. I could be convinced, though. I believe genuinely that if I saw a miracle with my own eyes, I don't think I'm incapable of having a religious conversion. Because at that point, you would be doing the dogmatic stonewalling that we are against.
Even talking about a miracle, let's say you were visited by what you believe to be a form that looked like Jesus in the middle of the night and says, I am the true God, and then you wake up and you're like, I'm going to convert.
I'm looking at a miracle like a city is on fire, and angels come down, and everyone is like, holy crap.
People are filming it, it's on YouTube. Like, that's a little bit more believable.
Well,
I would need it to be verified by someone else for myself, I'm sure.
That's the thing is you would need outside verification. But what's to stop? Like I fully don't believe any of the people that are like, oh, I saw this personal miracle and it's in their life. You know,
I was cured of cancer when I was supposed to die.
Here's the thing, though, is if, as Billy was saying, William, sorry,
it's
you can edit that out.
Yeah, he calls me all the time.
Yeah,
hey, I've gotten better.
If you were to wake up one night and a miracle, like Jesus in his form came to you,
Jesus is playing lacrosse in your bedroom with an angel.
and like you floating, you change your belief, but do you have to explain it to other? Like nobody's going to believe you, right? I mean, who would in their right mind?
I mean, people who have had similar experiences or believe similar experiences are possible.
Well, and the way I have a feeling if someone already believed in
they'd be more
their Christian God, then
there's no stress.
That's pushing forward their beliefs, even though it theoretically shouldn't. They shouldn't believe me any more than someone saying that Muhammad visited me in my sleep if they weren't Muslim.
Right. But I mean,
I find it interesting that miracles are usually contextual to your particular living situation. Like, I'd be very interested if a, 9th century Native American somehow knew about Islam. I'd be very interested in that. That would be a little bit weirder than, oh, you live in Catholic land and you saw Mary. It's a little convenient. You didn't see Buddha, I noticed. You saw the lady you see every day down the street. But that's just that denigrates the explanatory power of many miracles, is that there always seem to be conveniently of the faith of which you are already familiar and not someone else.
So
but that's a knock against individual religious doctrines, not the idea of a god or a deity, because maybe that's just how that deity chooses to interact with you, is through a spiritual language you understand. But just a fun fact I've noticed.
Yeah,
not the first one to notice it for sure, but there you are.
I'd like to present another question, and this would be for both of you guys. So, what happens when your belief in like Santa or any other?
What are you saying, Phil?
Oh, you can't publish this to kids.
Edit this out.
Edit it. When you found out that something that you truly believed was truth became false.
I mean, I remember what it was like to
easy?
give up the belief.
Was it hard?
It was. So, I guess you could say, I never really was committed to the belief in God. Like, it was just sort of an idea I knew about. So that's different. So I can't say I ever deconverted from that fully. But I will say, as stupid as it might sound, like when I was 4, man, Santa was real, and that was something.
That's easy. Let's go for Santa.
And Santa, in a way, is like there's no negatives.
Yeah.
He's just a jolly guy who loves you and wants to give you toys. What is better than that?
I would argue he's a little nicer than God because
he doesn't condemn you.
If you commit sins, even if you murder someone, he's going to give you coal, not send you to hell for eternity.
That's true.
Well, it's about the same, right? I mean,
when you're 4, and
it's the same fucking thing, man. I hated coal.
But it was one of those things. It was difficult because I liked what it gave me,
right?
But it was easy because it didn't make sense anymore.
Oh yeah.
And so
you can think about it logically.
I'm not asking people to give up beliefs in a vacuum. I'm not just walking in and saying, without presenting a counter argument or some examples or anything, that maybe you should at least question your faith. I'm just trying to say, look, there are other ways to look at a problem like this: the world, life, meaning, spirituality. Have you considered yours isn't the right one? here are some good reasons why.
And this is why the discussion is important, because I feel like in a vacuum, if the United States was a majority Christian, which we are, and those challenges were never tested, if atheist groups were never challenging, the having the nativity display on public grounds, if this discussion and
you mean if we roll back to like 1950s America, where like Protestant Christianity was the assumed norm, and
then it becomes assumed. You're hated on if that's not your belief. That we don't need to be in that world, and I think the battle alone of just doing this podcast, of having these discussions, is
I think
important.
religion needs to be. I think religion is inherently dangerous, not because of necessarily the individual beliefs, but because of what it grants people, and that's the idea that they own
divine
absolute
authority
truth and divine authority, and that to me is very scary. So look, are there positive benefits to it? Absolutely. But I think that the potential dangers, when someone is like, how do you fight or rationalize with someone who's willing to blow themselves up in your face?
Yeah, well,
I mean that to me is a serious problem, and it's hard to get there from even like if you go to the extreme of political life. Someone who does that is an atheist at least understands what they're giving up. There's at least a way you could approach them and say, we at least agree that if you do this, that's it. Like, there's no God, there's no heaven. The assumption is not that you're going to be rewarded for your action. So why wouldn't I do this? So it seems to naturally protect itself from that level of extreme.
Yeah.
But
extremism.
So are you guys reaching more towards the side of atheism, or just trying to balance out?
Well, I think...
Do you want a more equal society?
Well, for example...
or do you want everybody to be atheists?
Another tag is anti-theism. Like, we're actively...
Anti-theistic.
Against the
I believe
religion
it's
as
an
a
inherently
whole.
problematic belief.
Unfortunately, this battle, if you want to call it that, of religion versus non-religion and the whole discussion... Yeah. The non-religious numbers have been growing for years in most countries, including this.
Education and affluence basically go hand in hand with that.
If I'm being completely intellectually honest, I don't think we're ever going to get to a place where, at least, especially in my lifetime, where 100% of the population is atheist.
I don't particularly care either if it is, but I don't want the movers and shakers of the world.
Even if it is... that doesn't mean that there aren't large differences between us. Yeah. For example, like we've talked about...
Again, it's a negative creed. We've defined almost nothing except...
Yeah, we've talked about how narrow the definition of atheism is. For example, me and my girlfriend, she believes in like certain supernatural or like ghosts or spirits or energy, where I'm a little bit more of a, like, if I can't see it,
you're like a
basically doesn't
You're
exist.
an empiricist.
Yeah. But we're both atheists.
Right.
There's a large divides between the atheists, and I think differences in people are important, and it's almost the beauty of this world and life. It's like
we're not saying we have all the answers. We're just saying we think this one particular answer is
we're pretty close
flawed.
on, right?
And I'm pro truth ultimately. So look, again, I could be convinced, and again, my atheism doesn't necessarily define any other aspect of my worldview. I mean, it definitely informs it, but it's not that they are, other than certain things. Like it's much harder to explain, like dualism, the idea that we have souls and stuff like that. If you don't have a spiritual realm, like that just seems a lot tougher to get away with without God to sort of anchor it. That's the traditional anchor for that sort of idea. But there are systems that still believe in that, and they're well argued and well thought out, and then you can argue the merits of that based on either evidence or just the logical coherence of a theory like that. So I'm like, look, I think that it's a bad assumption. I think it's been made for the wrong reasons, and I think that it's got such negative consequences that it should be argued against actively, because it's being pushed actively.
And throughout history, it's been relatively unchallenged.
Yeah,
gotcha. The only
this is new.
It's challenged by other religion, not by non-religion.
Yeah.
Up until I'd say the past 50 to 100 years, it's, like Michael said, as people get more well educated, if the fields of science growing, and people like astrophysicists can look at our universe and be like, well, the Bible says that the Earth is anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 years old, but I don't see that evidence when I look at the stars and the size of the universe and the expansion, and like I don't see that. So
I don't think pointing out question marks is a problem, unless you just don't like being challenged.
Well, I mean, it's not about disproving the Bible. That's simple. I mean, like.
Well, no,
and that was just one example.
The idea,
no.
Again, the idea is that if you're not willing to at least challenge people on things, then how can you hope to affect a change in the world?
Oh, and so going.
Okay.
One of the differences between atheists is not everyone is ready or willing to have these conversations with others, and I'm okay with that as well. I'm okay with different levels of engagement. If you, as an atheist, don't want to try to challenge others' beliefs or at least have discussions with them, I don't look down on you in any way, because you feel differently about like the importance of the conversation or the knowledge that you pertain, or how, if you have any bearing over the other people.
Well, we're not trying to impose this on anyone. That's different. I'm not going to put in laws that say outlaw churches. No, you have absolute right to free assembly for religious worship. I will never take that away from you. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things like, I think the fact that they're tax exempt is kind of crap, but that's more for like financial and...
Yeah, if we didn't have a huge deficit and couldn't use help in other social programs or something, I probably wouldn't even think about it.
If they acted more like nonprofits is my thing.
Yeah.
But in any case, that's, again, there are practical things where, yes, I could say that the agenda maybe we want to advance could affect religious people in some material way.
So do you guys really not think that it's a natural order of society that religion will eventually disappear?
No.
No. Okay.
Because I believe humans are inherently wonky creatures, because we're cobbled together by the best efforts of evolutionary process.
Right.
We're not.
I've heard some atheists talk about this before, about us being pattern-seeking mammals, and so early mammals.
You go out in the woods at night and tell me you don't see evil in everything that moves.
Well, things like cavemen, they had to explain like thunder and rain, and eventually that became religion. You had to have a way to explain these things that you had no idea why water fell from the sky. Yeah. And I think that was a natural transition, and because there are so many unanswered questions that science may never touch, like what happens after you die, or we think nothing happens after you die because there's no evidence. But for people to be like, well, one of the arguments that they post forward is that the idea of an afterlife has persisted so long throughout so many religions, and I think that's because it's an answer that it says that they have.
It's also wish fulfillment. No one wants to die. No one wants to believe it just ends. Well, most people.
You want your dog to go to heaven. You want, your grandma that's the most beautiful, wonderful woman in your life. Like, you hope that she doesn't just die off. Like, you want her to have a happy...
Well, you gotta think, we live in a time, too, where death is not all that common for us in Western society. Like, we're not losing 60% of kids by the age of 2 to disease and things like that, which was the norm for the vast majority of humanity's existence. So we have it easy, and we still grapple with these issues. Imagine when literally you were going to live till 35, your wife is probably going to die in childbirth in her 20s.
Yeah.
Most of your children were going to die. How do you not... I mean, you're surrounded by so much pain and misery. Of course, if you're looking for answers, you're going to go towards the best solutions. And the problem, you want to believe that, well, I'll see them again. Because
there are those two routes. You can be like, all right, everyone I know and love has died. You can be like, either there is a God and there's an afterlife and they're living happily, or this is just how life works and they're dead and I'll never see them again. And I have a feeling that humans as a whole, not as individuals, because that's the way I feel like I group most of these things, they go towards the more comforting thoughts. And but to go to the question you asked, I think society will eventually get to a point where religion is the minority. Mm-hmm. But I have no idea how long that'll take. And I can't see religion going away just because we are so unique. I have a feeling that there will be this small minority that 1,000 years from now will still like do crazy dances and wear crazy clothes, and they'll have Sundays off and they'll congregate in church and
Druidism.
They'll pray to 30 gods. I don't know. I don't know how it'll work.
I mean, I think in our lifetime we'll see religion disappear, or at least dissipate to
I would say
a very, very small minority.
that might happen.
In our
Let's say
life.
by the end of the century, in like certain countries. So you get
Well, yeah,
a lot of
certain
Western
countries
Europe,
can,
but the
yes,
problem
yes.
is it's seeing a radicalization and extremism in huge other chunks of the world where it's getting more and more influential.
Right. Well,
And
that's
that's
all because of the lack of education.
well, I know, but there's nothing that says I'm not sure that we will get to that point where that can happen
As a
because
species,
I genuinely believe that at this
I wasn't
point,
asking about a species.
want to know. I mean, like society. I mean, I'm not saying humans are going to die off, but it wouldn't take but one or two nuclear weapons in the hands of the wrong people to set it off. And to me, yes, the people who are more likely than anyone to set it off are the people who think that they're doing God's work, and they're going to be rewarded for it.
Well,
the Soviet Union, they didn't do it because they had just as much to lose to as us. No one wanted that. But when you think when you have divine purpose,
Well, it reminds me of the
scares me.
people that are actively like vying for the end of the world and the tension in the Middle East, and
yeah, I mean, you've got countries, with massive amounts of chemical weapons that are currently being, overthrown, every 6 months right now in the Middle East. We don't necessarily know where all those weapons are now, and it wouldn't take much to start a regional war,
yeah,
which would destabilize. I mean, I do feel that we are much closer to the knife's edge than maybe we want to admit, which is, I've been reading Sam Harris's The End of Faith, which is actually from, I think, 2004, 2005. It's a ways old, I think. But he points out, he goes, we live at an age where the destructive capabilities are so easily accessible relative to what they used to be. I mean, you used to have an army to be able to raise one city. Now it takes,
10 people.
10 people and
some
a
AK-47s.
Some drones. No, drones and
yeah. And so
robotic warfare.
that to me means that we have to be a little less willing to wait. Because again, I think the people most willing to pull the trigger are likely, not that it's inherent or that it has to be this way, but I think it's likely going to be religious extremists.
So there's like two trains of thought, and I forget. I think it's Orson Welles that is. It's like the government will take over your life, and then there's somebody else who I forget that says pretty much human beings will be complacent and they will like let technology. Or it's pretty much saying that you're worried. You're worried that we will end ourselves.
I'm worried, not as a species. I think as a species that would be difficult, given that there are now 6.5.
Well, no. I mean, like, majority, like speaking. Like,
as a civilization, I think we could
like
go
that.
back to the 1300s pretty quickly. It wouldn't take much.
I don't think so. I think what would destroy us more is laziness, is complacency.
And I agree that, I mean, the idea that technology could basically start doing everything for us.
Extremism doesn't worry me as much as complacency.
But I guess the thing with laziness is I'm still here.
Yeah.
But if the nukes start going off, I'm not.
I don't. That doesn't stress me. Which is why, and I guess this is why I have the philosophy of I just don't care and apathy. It's because I really have a strong belief, which is funny. I have apathy.
The man speaking from apathy.
I have a strong belief that if I just don't care long enough, things will change on their own.
I'd rather be. I do believe that you have to be the change that you want to see.
Michael and I want to be agents of change, at least in this religious discussion.
You want to kick back with a beer and watch us do it.
And I want to watch y'all do it because, sadly, what happens is that being the agents of change, if you are so far, like, you get so far into being that agent of change that you find out that you're wrong in your whole life up till then.
Well, that's why you got to be careful.
Disappointment.
You have to do it honestly. Again, if you do it with the proper mindset of saying,
yes,
I'm not right. I have good reason to believe I'm right.
Right.
And I believe you're wrong. And I have good reason to believe you're wrong. So let's give it back and
Yeah,
forth.
and I think being honest with yourself, that's the most you can do. It's kind of like getting into a career that you love and you honestly, and then 30 years from now realizing you made a bad decision and you should have done something
Why didn't I
else.
go to art school? I really hate
you
my
did,
life.
You did the best with the information you had at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no regrets.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Right.
YOLO. Come
YOLO.
on, man.
YOLO.
You ought to look out.
You obviously like owls.
You obviously like owls. I play it safe, and so that's again, it's easy for me to say because I do play it safe, but it's easy for me to say being a fly on the wall and just observing and to take in information and process that on my own pace and make my own.
We want to help people do that. Ultimately, I guess is what it
Yes.
is. I'm not trying to. I don't want to force anyone into anything because I'm anti-totalitarian in my schemes too. I don't.
Yeah.
No one should be able to tell anyone what to believe, and I think that's. We should probably make this a last point, or last topic. There is no mandatory adoption that I think any atheist really, at least that's public, mainstream, is advocating. But you've got religions which are actively spread by the sword. That's Islam's creed in many ways is to spread, and the evangelical push in most, at least half of the religious traditions. I mean, Hinduism and Buddhism and those are a little bit different. But you've got 3.2 billion people, Christian and Muslim alone, that are set basically as part of their religious core on spreading that belief, because they think they have the truth and they are told other people need it. They have to have it. And again, when you have that righteous authority, that righteous God's on my side,
the one true God told me to do it.
When you own the truth, that's a terrifying thing. No one should own the truth. We should all be striving for it together, in my opinion.
Okay.
And so when you're fighting against that, I think their zealotry outpaces our own. But I think that we are, at least in Western society, hopefully starting to make some inroads to where people are having a harder and harder time believing it. But I think that, every person we can kind of push over the edge a little bit to maybe commit and join the cause, or at least actively decommit themselves from the other side, that's a win. And that pushes humanity to, I think, there's more potential on that side than the other.
I think, and then I just want to say my final statement.
No, I said last topic of
No,
discussion.
I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I am dictator.
I'm kidding.
We're done now.
No. I just wanted to say, like, if I could convince any of you guys to do anything, and I think the better solution for anybody is to not make them believe one way or the other, but just force somebody. And I know that sounds horrible, like it's forcing them, but forcing them to say, I don't know.
No, that is the key
most
tenet.
important thing to me.
Because
it's not forcing them to believe one way or the other. It's just forcing them to not believe and just say, I don't know.
If you can get them to admit, and that is the ultimate philosophical victory, in my opinion, because that once you get the skeptical bug in there, it does its own work, I think, in most cases. But you have to push back, because someone who thinks they already know is not going to willingly just give that up.
Right. No, I agree on that. It's just
so that's, again, I don't know blatantly.
What happens after you
if
die?
I ever claim
is
on
there
this,
a God? How did the universe begin? I don't know. I think this.
I got some decent responses right now, I think.
But I have no idea.
I do. I'm a redhead. So I have all the knowledge because I have no soul.
You stole souls from others.
Yep. Exactly.
To
I have a lot of souls.
Well, thanks for joining us. Hopefully we'll have Phil here on more often than not.
And who knows? Other guests could show up.
Yeah.
We could have a panel like 10 one week.
Or you could write to us.
I heard next week Michael Ian Black's supposed to show up.
Yeah.
Dude, have you been? That's awesome.
I've tweeted him.
My name's copyrighted,
but anyways, thanks for watching.
Yeah, we'll see you next week. All right, good. Go team. Break.
Thank you, Phillip.
Yep. Wow, chicka, chicka, bow, wow.